You know what's incredible about Frederick Douglass's story, KALIN? He went from being legally forbidden to read to becoming one of America's most influential writers, all while having a bounty on his head for being an escaped slave.
That transformation is remarkable, Pappy. The way he describes teaching himself to read in his narrative, trading bread with poor white children for lessons, shows such incredible determination.
And what's fascinating is that he wrote this groundbreaking narrative in 1845 when he was still in his 20s. He didn't even know his exact birth date. Historians think it was around 1818, but here he was crafting this document that would fundamentally challenge the entire institution of slavery.
The impact was immediate too. The book sold over 5,000 copies in its first 4 months, pretty extraordinary for that time period, especially for a black author.
Well, what makes it even more extraordinary is that he wrote it while still technically being a fugitive. He was risking everything by publishing his story. And you know what's really interesting? He deliberately left out the details of his escape to protect others who might use similar methods.
Hmm, that strategic thinking really shows up throughout his life, even in how he structured the narrative itself.
Exactly right. And speaking of structure, there's this pivotal moment he describes when his master catches his wife teaching him the alphabet. The master says something like, learning would forever unfit him to be a slave. That moment completely changed Douglas's understanding of power.
Oh, that's such a crucial turning point. It's like his master accidentally revealed the whole mechanism of control, that keeping enslaved people illiterate was deliberate policy.
And what's fascinating is how Douglas then used that insight. He realized that literacy wasn't just about reading, it was about power. He actually writes that learning to read was his pathway from slavery to freedom.
You know what really strikes me about his writing style? The way he balances personal experience with broader social analysis. Like when he describes how slavery corrupted not just the enslaved, but also the enslavers.
Well, that's particularly evident in how he describes Mrs. All's transformation. She starts kind and caring, but after becoming a slave owner, she becomes cruel and harsh. It's like he's showing us this before and after picture of how power can corrupt.
That psychological insight seems so modern. He's basically describing what we now call systemic racism, but he's doing it in 1845.
And you know what's really powerful? When he finally made it to New Bedford as a free man, he discovered that many of the working class white people there lived in worse conditions than some enslaved people in the South. But, and this is crucial, he notes that they still had their freedom, which made all the difference.
That observation really challenges the common justification at the time that slavery provided better living conditions than freedom. He's showing that material comfort isn't the point, it's about human dignity.
Right? And speaking of dignity, let's talk about how he handled skeptics. Some people couldn't believe that someone who had been enslaved could write so eloquently. He had to include letters from white abolitionists vouching for his story. Imagine having to prove your own life story like that.
That must have been incredibly frustrating, but didn't he turn that skepticism into an advantage somehow?
He absolutely did. He used their disbelief to prove his larger point about racial equality. If they couldn't believe an enslaved person could become so educated and eloquent, it exposed their own prejudices about human capability.
The legacy of his narrative remains highly relevant today. His insights about education, power, and systemic oppression still feel incredibly current.
That's because he wasn't just writing about slavery, he was writing about fundamental human rights and dignity. When he describes the songs enslaved people would sing, he reveals them as expressions of deep sorrow, not joy, as many whites assumed. He was teaching people how to look beyond surface appearances.
That ability to peel back layers of meaning and expose underlying truths, it's what makes his narrative so powerful even now, more than 175 years later.
And here's what I think is most remarkable. He showed that change is possible, both personal and societal. He went from being considered property to becoming one of the most influential Americans of his time. And in doing so, he proved that the whole system of racial hierarchy was built on lies.
That's really the heart of it, Pappy. His story isn't just about escaping slavery, it's about transforming society by exposing the truth and demanding justice.
Well, KALIN, looking at where we are today, I'd say his narrative isn't just a historical document, it's a roadmap for how individuals can face seemingly insurmountable obstacles and overcome them while also working to transform the larger society. That's why we're still reading and learning from it today.